Standing for the invocation. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Keith.
Our Heavenly Father, we are very grateful to be able to be here this evening and to meet with the town council. We pray for thy Spirit to bless us and guide us as we discuss various matters before us. We're also thankful to be able to recognize recipients of awards throughout our community. We're thankful for our emergency responders, for all that they do to protect us and to serve the needs of our community. We appreciate their sacrifice and pray for a blessing of peace and protection upon them and upon their families. We're thankful for the moisture that we have received, and we pray that thou wilt continue to bless our region with the snow that we need to help protect our forests and our lakes and our rivers and streams. And we acknowledge thy hand in all things and say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Keith. Item B on our agenda tonight is call to the public. This is a business meeting of the Town Council. The town values and welcomes public input. Please address the council as a whole and not individual council members. Do not address staff or members of the audience. Council action on items brought up and call to the public is limited by the open meeting law. Council may direct staff to study the matter and reschedule for further consideration at a later date. Items on the agenda are not heard and individuals are limited to 3 minutes. I don't have any requests, so if this is the time if you would like to speak tonight. Okay, we'll move on then to item C, which is our consent agenda. All items listed are considered routine matters and will be enacted by one motion of the council. There will be no separate discussion unless a member of council requests that an item or items be removed. Council members may ask questions without removal of the item from the consent agenda, and items are considered in their normal sequence as listed unless called out of order. Are there any questions from the council? Councilor Kriegbaum, any questions for you?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Snitzer.
I asked to be excused to abstain myself because one of the items on the consent agenda is something I'm involved with, so I'll abstain.
Okay, should we just pull that one item?
Just for that one item, yeah.
Okay. Christy, we need a motion for that, correct? Okay. Do I have a motion to remove item C2 from the consent agenda, please? Vice Mayor?
I move to remove item C2 from the consent agenda at this time.
I second that.
Thank you. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Councilor Kriegbaum?
Aye.
Thank you. Then I will entertain a motion for item C1. Vice Mayor?
I move to approve C1, the minutes of the town council meeting held on February 1st, 2024.
I second that.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Councilor Kriegbaum?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll go back then to item C2, which is a special event liquor license for the Balloon Festival. Vice Mayor?
I move to approve C2, the approval of a special event liquor license for the Balloon Festival at Mountain Meadow Park for June 21st and 22nd, 2024.
I second that.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. Councilor Kriegbaum?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll note that Councilor Snitzer abstained from that vote. Moving on then to item D, which is business before our council. Public comment will be taken at the beginning of each agenda item after the subject has been announced by the mayor and explained by staff. Any citizen who wishes may speak one time for 5 minutes on each agenda item before or after council discussion. Questions from council members, however, may be directed to staff or a member of the public through the mayor at any time. Item D1 is a presentation of awards for the Voice of Democracy audio essays. Christy, is this you? That's what I thought. George, come on up. Make sure you stay close to the little red light so everybody can hear you.
Very good. Mayor, Council, on behalf of VFW Post 2364, I want to thank you again for having us here every year doing this. It's a good thing I think, for some of the kids, and of course, law enforcement, firemen, EMTs, they don't get enough credit. And they can't take this one to the bank, but they might lighten their heart a little bit, I don't know. At the first meeting this month, John Bealer gave out one of the Voice of Democracy awards, and the other two winners we had, I believe, were over at the high school participating in a stage play. So we'd like to catch up on that tonight, starting out with the Voice of Democracy Awards. And I know that John explained it all to you last meeting, so I'll forego that tonight. So we'll start off with our third place award, Voice of Democracy, and that is Brooke Horn.
I don't see them here tonight. Both Brooke and Grace were going to come tonight. So I don't know if something happened. Unless they're out in the hallway, I don't see them.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay, we'll just move them along then. The other one's not here either?
No, neither one of
Yeah.
those.
You can announce it.
Go ahead and announce their names, though.
Okay, anyhow, go back. Brooke would have gotten a check for $50, and then Grace Smithson, who was second place, would have got a check for $75. And at the last council meeting, Jackson Woods, who was first place, got $100, and then with the district, he took third place, so he would have got another $75 there, so we got that.
Well, congratulations to all of those students.
Yes,
even
they
though
did a
they're
good
not-
job, they really do.
They do. Then we'll go ahead to your next item,
Yes,
D2,
we
which
have,
is presentation of public service awards from
Right.
VFW Post
Yeah,
2360.
law enforcement, firefighter, and an EMT, emergency medical technician. We'll start off with a code enforcement. It's a police service officer, Chelsea Haas, for the town of Pinetop-Lakeside. Next, we have Deputy Sheriff Haley Farkas from the Navajo County Sheriff's Office. No. And the next award, I think I said the same thing last year, is kind of close to my heart, as both my wife and I were detention officers down in Pima County for Clarence Stupnik back in, that's a long time ago if you guys knew who it was. But anyhow, we have Detention Deputy Sheriff Brian McElrath in the Navajo County Sheriff's Office. Firefighter Louis Marabelli from Pinetop Fire District. And last, we have paramedic Zach Van Slyke. Have I said that right? Again, Mayor, Council, thank you for having us.
Okay, yeah, the sheriff, and Dan, if we could get Dan up here, and Jim, and Dave, is Dave here? Or
He's
Brian?
floating around.
Oh, there he is. He's the Sheriff Klaus. We can get them all up here and get a picture. Huh? Okay.
You guys gotta get way closer together. One, two, three.
Thanks again.
Thank you for being here, George, and congratulations to all of you. We do appreciate all of your service. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to item D4, which is, item D3. Presentation from Navajo County Sheriff's Office, including a recap of 2023 and plans for 2024. Sheriff Klaus and Lieutenant Williams.
Good evening.
Nice
Mayor.
to see you.
Yeah. Thank you for having us, Mayor and city members of the council. It's good to be here, and thank you to the VFW and for the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside for always doing this annually, recognizing the men and women that serve as first responders throughout the community. As we were coming here tonight, I was thinking about all the different deputies and police officers and firefighters we've honored over the years coming here, and it's remarkable. There truly is a huge amount of true heroes that serve us each and every day, and couldn't be happier to be here to celebrate them today. So 2 or 3 years ago, we started as the Sheriff's Office coming to City Council meetings to give a brief presentation of an update of kind of some of the joint operations or task forces that we work together with the cities. We know that public safety is one of the more expensive items on each of your budgets. It's one of your more critical items that I know the public pays special attention to include roads is one of them as well. But public safety is something that's always on the forefront of each of our minds, and it does come at a high cost. And we as public safety officials and leaders always come to boards of supervisors, city councils asking for more and more and more, and sometimes you have to have a little justification as to why we need that expensive equipment or what we're doing. And I know that the Sheriff's Office operates in and around and throughout each of our communities within this county, and so I feel an obligation and a duty to report back to you as well. It means that we're operating within your city, and we're also operating on the, especially in Pinetop-Lakeside where it's so checkerboard, but we're also working with your police department each and every day, trying to find ways not to duplicate services, but to try to share resources. And I see one of the big successes of that has been the regional communication. That is something that dates back 10 years ago that we tried to get accomplished. And you saw Sholo really work there, and we're kind of on the northern part. But in part of our presentation I wanted to share tonight is how we've made a lot of stride in the last 2 years. So last year I came here and we talked about our SRT team or our joint team, how we're working together on that. We talked about communications, we talked about criminal investigations, we talked about MCAT, which we're going to give an update here tonight, and we talked about kind of joint operations with traffic enforcement. Those are kind of 5 areas that we work with your chief, trying to do these things in collaboration as law enforcement. This year, kind of some of our focus that I wanted to report on some successes where we've made some headway. We have looked for ways to fund a lot of these operations through the state or through different federal grants. I know that in my opening remarks, we talk about the cost, the burden that this brings, and you guys have so many different priorities that you're trying to weigh, and sometimes you're not able to fund these at the levels that we want. MCAT is one of those. That is it's a multi-agency joint task force. It is proactive work, and sometimes a lot of our chiefs and the sheriff's office, we need to have deputies and officers doing our calls for service, our first responder work, and these proactive task forces sometimes are the ones that get staffed last. And one of the things is we would like to join those task forces if there was funding or if there was vehicles or if there's things that make it appealing for us financially to join that. This last year, we, as the Arizona Sheriff's Association, lobbied at the state legislature through the governor's office to take the board. What Governor Ducey started was a border strike force. Well, with the change in leadership, that was kind of going to go away. And we kind of said, hey, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? And so Governor Hobbs had reallocated those funds through the legislative process. It was appropriation that was where all the counties were able to essentially apply for that. And so we did a $1 million kind of grant application to receive those funds, which would now be sent to the county to work and to fund MCAT. We used to do a lot of these fundings through burn jag and through asset forfeiture. Those things have really changed, and you're relying on the federal government. Now we're relying on the state, and not relying on the state, but we're asking the state to help fund it with the opioid crisis, with the fentanyl crisis, with the porous border, and we're seeing a lot of these things that have an effect on us. You're seeing a lot of great work that MCAT has been doing over the years. With their productivity and their production and what we've been able to manage here locally, we were able to ask for a $1 million grant, and we expect to receive that in full, which those funds were going to be pushed to each of our municipalities as an opportunity where they can put someone on the task force up to 75% funded. And so that's an exciting opportunity that is essentially 2 to 3 times more than what we've done in the past. And that's something that we are looking to be united within the county, that there's a great opportunity that's going to bring additional services to your community. The next thing on our communications, with Pinetop-Lakeside joint forces with Sholo, we have been working with Sholo to make sure that we're not going in different directions. I'm not an expert when it comes to VHF, UHF, LTE, and all these things, but I'm learning it as I'm going. And we have people that speak those languages. And we got together with your chief and the city of Sholo's chief to say, if you guys move this direction, we're going to move that direction, and vice versa. That way our 2 centers don't go in different directions. And that way that you as community members and councils don't see any variances between how these operate, and that when someone calls 911, I don't think they care if it goes to Holbrook or if it goes to Sholo or how it gets there. They just need resources sent quickly, right? And so that's what our focus has been. In November, last year, the Navajo County Sheriff's Office, so part of that conversation, I'll just step back just one. Part of that conversation was not only do we have these centers, but we need to really up our infrastructure, sites. We're operating off 4 tower sites in our entire county. We felt we need to be looking at other models of other counties. We need to be around 15 or 16, 18, 20 sites, towers, repeaters. We needed better portables, better mobiles in our vehicles. Navajo County Sheriff's Office applied for a DEMA grant through it's federal funds that were sent, they're from the state that were sent to DEMA that law enforcement was able to apply for. We applied, the Sheriff's Office, on behalf of all law enforcement. We received a $7 million grant. And with that grant, we're purchasing radios for every police officer in this county. And we're purchasing radio sites and all that, so that we are taking the steps forward with the city of Sholo to ensure that everybody's communication in everybody's vehicle, fire and police and sheriffs, is all talking on the same language. And that is in the works now. The grant has been awarded, and it's a $5 million, or it's a 5-year, $7 million grant. And $2 or $3 million of those was carved out for radio infrastructure. Next thing, 3 or 4 years ago, we talked about a jail district being implemented within Navajo County. That has been about 5 years. That has been very, it's put good foundation and good structure to the future of jail operations within this county. With that, we in the last couple years have gone outside of just looking at detention costs, medical costs, and feeding inmates and just doing those routine mandatory obligations that we have. We're now looking at programs that we're starting within the jail to do actual rehabilitation, or what we're calling reentry. When we say reentry, when people leave the facility and reenter society, these are my neighbors, these are your neighbors, they are being held accountable and they're being booked in for crimes that they've committed. But while they're there, we're finding that a vast majority of these, around 50%, it's a substance, mental illness or a substance abuse type thing. The other half are serious crimes that they would probably end up spending DOC time. But on those ones that are short-term going to be re-entered, we're looking to start two programs. One for this re-entry where they, working with the prosecutor's office, where they are going to be given kind of diversions for treatment, and where their accountability is not dismissed, but it's in condition with receiving treatment. And then we're going to also have in-house or in custody substance abuse treatment. That way, when your cities and the cities within here book them in within our jail, you're going to get it back, hopefully, a better citizen that's going to come back and with successes of not having as many addicted to these drugs, and hopefully become a property owner, taxpayer, and start contributing to society. So that is something that we're really excited about. Because of that jail district and that we now have that stability in there, we now are applying for these grants. We're seeing great strides in what we are in our jail operations. Touched on the regional dispatch and how that's moving along, coming in the same direction. CI, criminal investigations. You guys have had one of the best, or not the best, one of the most prolific cold case solved cases in recent history in this county. It was remarkable work that your police department did. You should be extremely proud of that case that they did. Criminal investigations is one of the most critical aspects. I look at each of our departments. That is where we're handling some of the more serious crimes. We're looking at 30-year-old homicides that was dealing with here. We're looking at crimes against children. We're looking at large dollar frauds. We're looking at suicides and essentially all death investigations. And we need to make sure we do it right and we don't make any type of mistakes. And that's where we as a county have really worked together. We have what we call the Navajo County Homicide Task Force. If we have a critical incident, we rely on each of the communities or each of the cities to come together to support one another. But it gets burdensome on a lot of these smaller departments where they're like, I don't have the overtime funds to send them there. I don't have the training for these types of things. And then vice versa, when someone has to come to our community and lose their detective for a day or two, it's one of those things. It's hard to wait, but we always do what's best for the community. So we had an appropriation that now we've just received it for the second year in a row. We're receiving $120,000 each budget year from the state to go to these regional. There's 5 regional task force identified, and Navajo County was one of them because we applied through the sheriff's office. That way, when we ask for your detectives to go to these type of trainings or to work with us, that we can help with not only the cost of the overtime, but with the training and the supplies. And so those are ways that we're looking for solutions. We're finding these funds in these 3 different areas that are really, hopefully, going to make a difference in our public safety and our criminal justice going forward. So with that, I just want to give a quick update on those 5 things, and then we had kind of our MCAT update we always do. We try to talk about specifically of the type of crimes that we were working in and around the Pinetop-Lakeside area and some of those statistical data. Okay. He was going to give this part of it, but he's running late, so I think you just may hold him in contempt for something, right? But I'll go ahead and do it. There we go. Where do I point it at this?
Just try to point it at this computer.
Oh, there
you go. Yeah.
Okay, so these are their 2022 annual statistics for Navajo. As you can see, methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine was one of the more surprising things. But these are in either in pounds or grams of what we see. You can see that fentanyl at 2.1 million pills is the drug of choice throughout America, in Arizona, and in Navajo County. It is overtaken what we're seeing being trafficked, what we're seeing on the streets. It has the highest level of potency. You've seen all the reports. It's still, I think it was 2 years ago, Arizona does a threat assessment on the drug trafficking and what HIDA sees as the biggest threats to our communities. And it was methamphetamine held the top drug for at least a decade. It was 2 years ago that fentanyl overcame that, and it's done it with quite the force. And it's something that we're certainly concerned about, and we're continued because the numbers just keep rising and rising. Everything else kind of seemed to have plateaued, but cocaine had made a rise in the last year. We conducted 68 search warrants throughout. This is MCAT, which is the regional task force that everybody participates with, and they conducted 68 search warrants countywide during that last year. That was in 22. Here in 23, you can see that the fentanyl pills went down by 1 million. A lot of those seizures are coming on the interstate, and we would attribute throughout Arizona the numbers were still higher, but our local seizures just went down. It's not that we're seeing less coming through the state. We just interdicted less on the interstate. And part of that would be that our deputies and our detectives working in this task force were, instead of doing a lot of interdiction work, we're doing a lot of those search warrants and working what we call drug trafficking organizations and trying to intercept those and dismantle those. Some of the comparisons of kind of the trends have stayed consistent throughout the years, but certainly methamphetamine and fentanyl is the two highest producers. MCAT arrests compared from 2022 to 2023, we had 243 this year, or last year, and then 228 the year before. So you see our arrests with this task force have gone up. Here's our agency assist broken down between each agency. And as you can see in the pie chart, they're assisting every agency to include Apache County, as they've become truly one of the hardest hitting, fastest reacting groups within the White Mountains. We're really proud of the work that they've done, and that each of these agencies not rely on them, but they depend on them, and they really utilize their services. Wiley, are you familiar with this one? Yeah.
So back in April, we had some information that we received from some of our local agency officers with different subjects coming in and out of a hotel room in the Sholo area. Within that, we started looking into it with our detectives, with the assistance of like DPS, Arizona Gang Task Force as well. Through this, multiple traffic stops were made throughout Sholo, into Snowflake, Heber, even up into Pinetop, that were all related to coming from this room. By the time we were done with it, we made the 19 arrests. 5 search warrants were actually served. One of them was actually served by Phoenix Drug Enforcement Bureau with us on a target down in the valley that all tied into this area. This is also part of a couple people that we have actually arrested 2 to 3 times. Not just only our task force, but Sholo PD, Pinetop-Lakeside police officers. So it's one of them, and we've actually just got a sentence in both. 2 of the suspects received 5 years prison time out of it, so that's been really good.
Thank you. Here we have a couple.
Go ahead and go with those 2.
Yeah, remember these?
So we have one detective that's actually a full-time task force officer assigned to Homeland Security out of Flagstaff. They received a lot of multiple tips regarding sex offenses throughout the state. Our officer that's assigned to that, this tip came in and received information of a bunch of sexually explicit material involving a child. He called me directly. We started working it with Homeland Security. Same day that we had the tip, we had the suspect in custody. Did 3 search warrants on the 2 houses, 1 on a vehicle. Was able to get the suspect in custody who was working at a local business. Speaking with county attorneys, I mean, they're so far up at 11 counts of the sexual exploitation of a minor photographs. There is still information going on, investigation to further into this, which could lead to more charges. So basically our MCAT team's not only just looking at our dope stuff. If it's a major crime, we get information on it, we kind of run with it. Also in August, Winslow Police Department called us and said, hey, we've got a bunch of string of burglaries in the area, where one of them is actually a robbery. Guy walks into a Circle K, just walks in there with a knife, starts just loading alcohol, cigarettes, and walks out with about $4,000 worth of product. We was able to identify who the guy was, which was also one of our targets that we were looking at for some drug sales. So within 24 hours, we did a search warrant on the residence and recovered probably 50 to 60% of the property and located a stolen firearm along with some drugs out of it. So it was a really good partnership with all the agencies on any of these cases, because with just our little task force, there's usually three detectives, one sergeant working most of it. We can't do it without the help of our local agencies and the patrol officers, just because of manpower and the time. It's been really beneficial.
Thank you. We have one more.
Yeah, this one, speaking of jail operations, we had an overdose. You know, fentanyl is smuggled into everywhere. We had an individual who was remanded in court and was sent, to jail, and he had smuggled in a couple pills in his shoes that was missed during the search. He had transferred one to his a cellmate who started overdose. That's why these deputies are recognized for their life-saving measures. They perform CPR, revive him, but MCAT was called in to do an investigation to find out who he was, who brought him in, and where they did that. With that information, they were able to go back to the residence, intercept a lot of stolen guns, fentanyl that was still in the home. That led to several arrests from that. So even though we took one tragic scenario that occurred in the jail, this great team was able to further that and bring several others that were contributing this to justice. With that, those are just a couple of the snapshots of the operations that we're doing here in Navajo County. But of course, open it up to any questions if you have any. If not, I just want to thank you again for your time. Thank you for the partnership and the work that we working with your city, and the great chief and command staff that you have at the city of Pinetop that work diligently to ensure that public safety is a priority within this community. And we enjoy working with them and being partners in that mission each and every day. So,
Thank you, Sheriff and Wiley. Appreciate those updates. It's just amazing, kind of scary. You know, our little small towns, we would think that we were new to this, but I think you have your head in the sand if you continue to think that. Any other questions or comments? That was a great report. Councillor Craigbaum, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you.
And we appreciate all the work that you're doing to obtain those grants. We all know how precious the dollar is, and we need to keep working with that. So thank you, Sheriff and Wiley, for coming tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, appreciate it very much. We'll then go ahead and move on to item D4, which is consider approval of resolution number 24-1700, authorizing a call of election for the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside 2024 primary and general elections. Christy, this one is you.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am going to get back over to the correct screen here. So this resolution is for the call of election for the primary election and, if needed, the general election. I just want to give a little bit of background because as of Friday, February 9th, the governor signed House Bill 2785, which changed the primary election by 1 week. It moved it 1 week earlier. The reason for the change in that date is in 2022, a bill was signed that changed the percentage of ballots that could be challenged for a recount from 0.1 to 0.5. So with the increase, they say it could take longer. There's going to be, it could possibly cause more recounts. So in order to give them enough time to get the ballots counted so that they do count in the election, they had to change it by a week. This could be a permanent thing is what they're saying. It's not just for the primary election this year. It could be for the ones oncoming. This doesn't affect the general election, but there was a possibility that if that didn't get changed, none of Arizona's votes would have counted at all. So they moved that to July 30th. For those candidates that picked up petitions and had signatures before the change, which it was effective on the 9th, I think I said that. But if the petition said that they were signing for an August 6th election, they're letting us go ahead and take those petitions because it was changed after, that was signed by a legislator after. And then as of the 9th, every petition needs to state that the election is July 30th. and they'll all be accepted. We have 3 4-year seats and 1 2-year seat on this election. Councilmember Krigbaum, Councilmember Snitzer, Councilmember Smith, their seats are up, so those will be for 4-year seats. And then Jeff Phillips, who was recently appointed, was finishing out a term when Councilmember Brimhall left, and that will be there'll be 2 years left on that term after this election. So we'll have 4 seats in the primary election. If all 4 seats get majority votes, then we won't have to take it to the general. But we're going to go ahead and just add the general and the primary elections together into this call of election. Okay. Is there any questions on that?
Any questions for Christy? Thank you for explaining all that. That was a little bit confusing when the state did that to us, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So do I have a motion? Vice Mayor?
I move to approve resolution number 24-1700, authorizing the call of election for the town's 2024 primary election to be held on July 30th, 2024, and the general election, if needed, being held on November 5th, 2024.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Councillor Krigbaum?
Aye.
Thank you. That carries unanimously. There being no further business, I will adjourn our regular council meeting. Thank you.
You give me 1 second, Mayor Irwin, to switch my recorders.
Okay.
Thank you.
I need to get to my agenda too. So.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, hang on a minute. I need to get to my.
Okay.
We don't have to figure all this out anymore. Okay. I will call the Board of Adjustment meeting to order this evening. We do have a quorum. Again, Councilor Board Member Krigbaum is on the phone with us today. This is a business meeting of the Board of Adjustment. The board values and welcomes public input. Please address us as a whole and not individual board members. Do not address staff or members of the audience. Board action on items brought up in call to the public is limited by the open meeting law. The board may direct staff to study the matter and reschedule for further consideration at a later date. Items on the agenda will not be heard or discussed in call to the public, and individuals are limited to 3 minutes of the Board of Adjustment special meeting held on November 2nd, 2023. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Announced by the mayor and explained by staff. Any citizen who of conditional use permit, CUP.
This item is the second time you've seen this item. It was previously for your consideration in November, Alpha. This location is a neutral site, 106.B.2, in a C1 light commercial zoning district. The applicant must 17.106.020B. The commission unanimously voted to deny the issuance of a CUP. The Board of Adjustment convened November 2nd, 2023, to consider an appeal to the denial of CUP 133. The applicant requested a 90-day extension to allow for the exploration of an alternative location for the applicant failed to appeal within the allotted time. A tower with a maximum height of 75 feet or the height of the tree line 200 feet, but in no case greater than 95 feet per 17.106 is permitted under the existing zoning with a conditional use permit. However, the height is 170 feet with a 5-foot lightning rod. Hence, the requested tower height of 180 feet above the maximum height. The applicant proposes 4 tech lights on a 10 stations. Per 17.106.030D, the lighting is only permissible for by the FAA, FCC, or another governmental agency. All lighting must be in conformance with 17. Vertical Bridge proposes to remove an existing 8-foot fence around the western perimeter of the parcel. Fences over 6 feet are only permitted as a conditional use permit condition per 17108-060A2. The Board of Adjustment could require an 8-foot tall fence as a condition of approval. It is recommended that an 8-foot CMU block wall be utilized for screening. A landscaping plan has yet to be submitted as part of the application. For 17106-030F4F, landscaping shall mitigate the visual impact of a wireless communication facility and ancillary structures. Evergreen plant material of a minimum height of 5 feet shall be planted adjacent to the exterior of any wall or fence at least every 10 feet from center to center. The Community Development Director or the Planning and Zoning Commission, or in this case, the Board of Adjustment, may waive or reduce these landscaping requirements if it is deemed unnecessary or impractical to provide necessary screening. Per 17106-030F4C, simulated branches must taper toward the top of the tower to give the appearance of a natural, conically shaped evergreen tree. The submitted tower elevation does not demonstrate conformance to this requirement, as it does not taper to give the appearance of a natural, conically shaped evergreen tree, but instead is a cylindrical shape. Some other things to consider include general requirements outlined in 17106-030F, which requires wireless communication facilities to be sited and constructed to preserve the pre-existing character of surrounding buildings and vegetation. While this site is neutral, it is immediately adjacent to the RV park. Most jurisdictions require a minimum of 1-to-1 setback in the event of catastrophic failure of a tower. Until recently, we only required a fall zone letter. The fall zone letter stated multiple times that it cannot guarantee the tower would fall within the 20-foot fall zone radius, which statements such as it will likely do and a best attempt to meet the requirements, given that current codes do not address failure mechanics, is impossible to predict the behavior of a failing structure. The fall zone requires the applicant to submit additional information to provide further justification if they believe it is necessary or appropriate. Any existing tower could accommodate the tower, an existing tower could accommodate the tower within 0.6 of a mile. If the proposal progresses with approval, there is a likelihood that there could be 3 towers within this area, including the existing and the proposed tower from Pinetop Fire. Per 17106-080D, coordination with federal law, a conditional use permit may be granted despite noncompliance with the provisions of this section whenever denial of a conditional use permit would unreasonably discriminate among providers of a functionally equivalent personal wireless service or prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting provision of personal wireless services within the meaning of 47 United States Code Section 332C7BI. In evaluating an application for a conditional use permit, no consideration shall be given to the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such emissions follow the regulations of the Federal Communications Commissions as provided in 47 United States Code Section 332C7B4. For analysis, I've provided for the Board of Adjustment the following. The applicant, Vertical Bridge, requests to have a conditional use permit issued for a cell tower. On August 24, 2023, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously 6-0 denied the issuance of the conditional use permit. The reasons for the denial are as follows. The applicant failed to provide engineering reports sealed by a licensed structural engineer per 17.106.070.1 CD. The applicant failed to show all preferred sites where the tower could be sited per 17.106.70B1. The applicant failed to provide written explanation of why they did not select a preferred site, including their best efforts made to secure each of the preferred sites, why such efforts were unsuccessful, and why each of the preferred sites is not technically or legally feasible per 17.106.70B.3. The applicant proposed tech lights on the tower for installing new appurtenances. However, no artificial lighting of wireless communication facilities is permitted unless such artificial lighting is required by the FAA or the FCC or another state or federal agency of competent jurisdiction or necessary for security. Such lighting shall comply with the lighting regulations found in Section 17.104.100. The applicant failed to locate the wireless communication facility away from residential neighborhoods whenever feasible per 17.106.10b. While the applicant proposes to camouflage the site, the camouflage must taper toward the top and the tower shall be painted to emulate a natural tree trunk per 17.106.30 F4C and D. And finally, under the effective ordinance 2446.8, the tower would require a 225-foot setback per 17.106.040.2. For my recommendations, I provide the following. Staff recommends denying the CUP for the following reasons. The proposed tower's height is 180 feet. A maximum height of 75 feet is allowable, and in no case greater than 95 feet in the site designated as neutral. The applicant must submit evidence of meeting the requirements established within 17106-70B3 regarding contact with all other tower providers and property owners within preferred sites. The applicant failed to submit a fall zone letter that exemplifies confidence that the tower would not harm residents in the RV park in the event of a catastrophic failure. The applicant failed to locate the site away from the residential neighborhood per 17106-10B. The applicant should have considered the requirements outlined in 17106-30F requiring wireless communication facilities to be sited and constructed to preserve the pre-existing character of the surrounding buildings and vegetation. While this is a neutral site, it is immediately adjacent to an RV park. A landscaping plan conforming with 17130F4 still needs to be submitted. Tech lighting does not meet the requirements established within 17104-100 and 17106-030D. The effective setbacks cannot be met at the site per 17106-42. If the Board of Adjustment chooses to uphold denial, the motion must contain the reasons for the denial, which shall be supported by substantial evidence in the written record. That's all for now for my staff report.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
I didn't put anybody to sleep.
That was a great start.
towel or something?
You need a drink of water.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Thank you, Jeremiah. Are there any questions currently for Jeremiah? Counselor Craigbaum, do you have any questions?
No,
Okay.
Mayor Irwin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to hear from the applicant at this time. If you'd come up and remind us your name and everything, please.
Thank you for having us here today. Myself, Shannon McRae, State 48 Development Consulting on behalf of Vertical Bridge, and Stephen Kennedy, the RF engineer, will be presenting on behalf of Vertical Bridge for this wireless facility. So whenever,
There.
thank you. So today we're going to be going over the new proposed wireless facility on behalf of Vertical Bridge. The site name is USAZ 5121. This is CUP 133. So the proposed wireless facility will be located on parcel 411-43008A. And as mentioned by staff, it's on a parcel zoned C1. It will be designed as a monopine to blend in with the surrounding pine trees in the area and will be located within a 43 by 37 foot enclosure surrounded by an 8-foot high chain link fence compound. The overall height of the tower will be 180 feet, which will allow for co-location and may include multiple antennas, as shown on a later slide with the elevations. And we did design the tower with a 20-foot fall radius to contain debris on site. So here is just an aerial view of the overall site plan. As you can see, that square that's on the screen there, that just shows where the tower is in proximity to the parcel lines. Here is an enlarged site plan. This shows the 10 by 15 concrete pad for associated ground equipment, the 4 by 9 concrete pad for the emergency backup generator, and we would like to note for the record that emergency backup generators will cycle once per week for a total of 15 minutes and emit a noise of around 70 to 90 decibels, which is about the equivalent of a car passing by. So on the screen here, you can see the elevations of the tower. The initial anchor tenant would be installed at that top there. You can see that. And that is just, the rad is basically the center of antennas where it will be installed on the tower. And let me go ahead and pull those up here. So T-Mobile is the initial anchor tenant. They will be installed at a rad of 171 feet. The second co-locator would be installed at a rad of 159 feet. And the third co-locator would be installed at a rad of 147 feet. There's additional views of the elevation of the tower. So stealth designs, per the Pinetop Code, it encourages stealth designs to blend in with the surrounding area. As such, Vertical Bridge decided that a monopine would best suit this area. A monopine is a tower that's designed to look like a pine tree. This photo on the right is not a photo from this specific area, but from a different tower. As you can see in the back, the monopine kind of blends in with the surrounding pine trees. So the fall zone, the Pinetop-Lakeside Town Code under Chapter 17.106 stated that the applicant must provide a certified letter from a structural engineer showing that the structural failure characteristics of the wireless communication facility and demonstration that site and setbacks are adequate to contain debris on site. At the time of submittal, this was the code. It is Vertical Bridge's position that, as such, since it was submitted under this code and because the application was active, that the old code applies to our site. We did provide a 20-foot fall zone letter to the jurisdiction, and on the next slide, this is just a photo of that fall letter. So to review preferred sites, neutral sites, and disfavored sites, I won't go through all of the details, but preferred sites would include the fire station across the street. And then neutral sites is any site zoned C1, PUD, or R, LOW. Disfavored sites would be residential neighborhoods. So I'll go ahead and skip just to this one, but as you can see on the zoning map here, the green star on the slide indicates where our proposed site is located. It's located on a parcel zoned C1, which is listed as a neutral site. Our LOW is also listed as a neutral site per the code, and that RV park is just north of our site there, located on our LOW. So that's just an aerial view there. Okay, so I will go ahead and let the RF engineer who is here speak to the significant gap in service. But the site is, the only preferred option would be the fire station that was approximately 500 feet away. I know we had at our last hearing requested an extension to look into the fire department, but ultimately it did not work for T-Mobile, which is why we're back here today. And then this is just an aerial view of the proposed site. The 5-year facilities plan, it was stated that that was not included with our application, and we just would like to state that we did include that, which had a site inventory and the technologies that would be included on the tower. And then we did have a note that stated that there were no existing T-Mobile towers or vertical bridge wireless facilities within the jurisdiction. That's just a photo of the 5-year facilities plan. And then the Pinetop-Lakeside Code does encourage co-location. We did explore the option of co-locating on nearby structures, and he'll go ahead and deep dive into that a little further. But we did determine that this area had the highest need for improved coverage in the area, and the additional height of the tower beyond the prescribed limit in the code was necessary to achieve the coverage objective that the initial anchor tenant was looking to achieve. I'll go ahead and hand the presentation over to our RF engineer, Stephen Kennedy, to go over those coverage maps, and then if you have any questions, feel free to let us know.
Thank you.
Stephen Kennedy. I'm the owner of Blvd Coast Consultants out of Arizona. I've got 34 years design experience in the wireless communications industry. Can you bring up the RF justification deck? That's the alternate site analysis. Try the other deck. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, once again, talking about the RF design analysis for the T-Mobile site for Vertical Bridge. So I'm an independent consulting RF engineer. I do not work for T-Mobile. I represent Vertical Bridge and consult with the T-Mobile engineers. Okay, so 2 reasons why carriers design sites. As your sheriff stood up in front of you a little while ago and said that their 4 sites need to be about 20, it's infrastructure. But the need is there. So just like the sheriff's department wants to expand the radio network for first responders, the carriers want to expand their networks to provide service for their customers. 2 types of things create a need for a site. One is coverage, and that is the ability for a transceiver on a cell site to talk to the transceiver in the phone and have a connection and be able to follow through that connection without a drop call or without a loss of signal. That's coverage. Capacity is the ability to process the traffic for the wireless phones. Now, when I started in this business 34 years ago, all you could do on a phone was talk. Now we do a lot more with them. We stream videos, we do web searches, there's apps like crazy on these things. That cost capacity, that costs throughput. Capacity and throughput, or capacity, can be explained using an analogy of a water hose. So if you have a water hose in your front yard, you're out working in the front yard, one day you're the only person drinking from the water hose, you're getting 100% of the capacity. All the bandwidth is available to you. If your neighbor walks up and says, hey, I want to grab water off the water hose too, now the capacity is 50%. You add 2 more neighbors, drops to 25%. 4 more neighbors, it drops to 12.5%, down, down, down. So the more users, the less water or capacity per user there is. These sites can work 300 or 400 users at a time, because these phones, while you may not be active on the phone, it's active talking to servers and networks because of all the apps you're running on your phone. So that's the capacity impact. All right, so the objective new site is to provide bandwidth for customers in the area, provide coverage for T-Mobile users in this area because there's no T-Mobile coverage at this time. So this site would provide coverage along 260 and the feeder roads in the area where we have a significant gap in service or no service. 96% of Americans own a cell phone, 57% of American homes rely exclusively on cell phones, and 84% or more of 911 emergency calls are made from cell phones. Site, 175-foot monopine with 5-foot appurtenances. That's all the technical data, latitude, longitude, ground elevation. And the antenna center line for T-Mobile is 171. Why here? Lack of coverage in Pinetop, lack of services in surrounding suburban and rural areas. There's a significant gap in service, i.e. T-Mobile has no service in the area. There's been a significant amount of increased network use for all the networks across rural Arizona just because of COVID and a lot of people working from home, and that's really put demand on a lot of these networks. And as you guys probably are approving new homes being built and all sorts of fun stuff, it's expanding in the rural areas. Here's Zoomer proposed site. There's the nearest neighbor T-Mobile sites. They're 53.5 miles away and 63.7 miles away. So T-Mobile's working to expand that, but this is one of the key sites for that. This is T-Mobile Cell Mapper. This is coverage that's provided by drive test units or vans that drive around and they take readings across the United States, and they have a bunch of antennas on the top of the van and a bunch of phones, and they'll go take readings and report this back to servers. This is showing that there is nothing for T-Mobile in the area, basically, not even enough to cause a receiver to go into full quieting. This is open signal. This is, so if you ever load an app on your phone like Facebook or something, you're giving all these permissions for Facebook to load this stuff on your phone, you're going to load a thin client, and that's Open Signal's thin client. What that thin client does is it sends to Open Signal servers, hey, the telephone connected to the network, it did some business, and the coverage was good or the coverage was bad. And we can see from this that it's significantly lacking. This is reference signal receive power. This is a way that we show coverage in a digital network or a broadband network. So green means to a 95% probability that there's going to be service inside a building. So you've got all the walls, you've got all the things that can pass through and slow down the signal and not allow entry. So green, when it runs a propagation modeling, it's showing that you're going to have to a 95% probability coverage indoors. If you see yellow, that's in vehicle. And if you see red, that's open field. You're out in the golf course, you're out in your front porch, you're not inside or not in a vehicle. This is for low band, and to make note, 85% of T-Mobile spectrum, as allocated by the Federal Communications Commission, is midband. So this is low band. So it provides a greater service area. The RF, the radio energy, propagates farther. If we go to the midband, we see a change. Midband is significantly smaller. So 85% of the spectrum, this is what the coverage it's going to provide, where 15% of the spectrum. I put a blue circle in to give kind of a reference of what the low band versus the mid band's doing. Okay, that's the last of that one. The next thing that I was requested to do was an alternate site analysis. That's it. Okay, so I was requested to review other sites within the area at the heights that were available on those sites compared to the proposed by T-Mobile Vertical Bridge. So the local jurisdiction required this. 2 towers exist within 1.25 miles of the proposed. Primary coverage objective is Highway 260 towards Pinetop-Lakeside and south and east of the proposed towards the country club. Following propagation is for low band as well as mid band, just like we did before. So here's the area. So there's the distance from the proposed to the other sites. One other site's 0.8 miles away. The other one is 1.23 miles away. So alternate site 1, owned by White Mountain Communications, 150-foot self-support tower. Highest height available was 110 feet. So it's not, you're not be able to put the antennas at the top of the tower because somebody's already there. Ground elevation 6,961 feet. Alternate site 2, owned by Navajo Electric Company, 196-foot self-support tower. Highest height available is 130 feet, and that's at 7178 MSL. The jurisdiction also requested the proposed antennas be lowered to 71 feet above ground level and compared to the proposed. So this is the first this is low band, so if we look at the blue circle, this is what the proposed site's going to be able to provide within 171-foot antenna center line for low band. This is 110 foot on the site to the west, so we can see a slight difference in what's being covered on the frequencies. And then we get alternate 2, that's low band on for that site, so we can see that it's going to be, you know, coverage in the southeast, but not coverage towards the center or the west within the primary coverage objective. All right. Then we looked at proposed 71 foot, so we lowered the antenna height from 171 down to 71, and that shows the difference in propagation analysis. If you remember on the 171, significantly more green and yellow within the blue circle. So a significant drop in what the site would do at 71 feet. This is mid-band, so 171, we saw that it's mid-band. It's not going to propagate into the buildings quite as well, just because the wavelength it's working at. Here's the RP coverage for the 110-foot alternate. There's the RP coverage for the alternate number 2. And there's the RSRP coverage for 71 feet. So alternate sites do not provide the same level of service as the proposed. Heights available on the alternates are not as high as the proposed. Alternates impact the coverage of low band frequencies and significantly impact coverage of high band or mid band frequencies. And you get into 3,800 to 4,200 megahertz, and it really makes an impact. And then the reduction in height to 71 significantly reduces what the site can do. So recommended, please approve the proposed site at the height in order for T-Mobile to the area. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions? Councilor Schnitzer?
Yeah, back in, I don't begin to understand all the technical stuff, but back in October, I made a request and they said they would comply, and it's not here. My request was everything that was presented showed what happens if you have one tower. And my request was that if we have the existing towers and we use both of those towers and mount their equipment on both of those towers, what would the coverage look like then?
The coverage would be probably 80% of what the proposed site would do.
The 80% of what the one single tall tower?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so they could basically get at least 80% there. If they added a third short tower, if they built the tower in the middle, and it was a short tower, which is whatever's permitted, I forget, 79, 80, whatever it is feet, but if you had those 3 towers, what would the coverage look like? Any idea?
Coverage would be comparable, but once again, T-Mobile's trying to do it with one asset versus three assets.
Well, it's much, from a financial standpoint, I understand it's easier to have a few big towers.
Yes, sir.
But it sounds to me like they could get where they want to get if they built a small tower and then rented space on the other two towers. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Any other questions for Steve? Thank you for your presentation. I would like to invite Jeremiah to come back up, please, and go over what you've got for us.
So we had a third-party RF engineer basically run the numbers on the same site. And interestingly enough, the RF engineer that we selected to do this had worked for T-Mobile for 20 plus years. And I don't purport to understand all of this information that's in here either, Councilor Snitzer, but I'll do my best to convey it to the members of the board. So they basically ran the same numbers, and some of the comments that they made were the values provided by the applicant were listed as RSRP, though the provided values were much higher strength than the applicant's typical design thresholds. And they go and they as the maps that the applicant showed, they have some similar, but they're slightly different, and hopefully the board had time to review those. They're also available in the packet for anybody interested at home or in the audience, or you can view them digitally. But I'll go through the general discussion and the concerns that they had. They said that the proposed location provides indoor coverage of the areas in Pinetop along Highway 260 from Sweetwater Ranch to the west to just past Buck Springs Road, entrance into the White Mountain Summer Homes and Pinetop Lakes Country Club. Pinetop Lakes has some indoor service, but mostly in vehicle coverage along Buck Springs to Branding Iron Loop. White Mountain Country Club is not serviced well. Coverage is mostly local to the businesses along Highway 260, the majority of which are to the west of the proposed tower location, the Wisecom Tower area that's actually been purchased by TowerCo. The improvements in coverage to the east and south over the Wisecom Tower results from increased ground elevation of 7170 at the proposed location versus 6960 at the Wisecom Tower, plus the increased rad center of 171 versus 117. Available at Wisecom, a total of 165 feet increase in antenna height. However, the Wisecom Tower, as shown later, provides better target coverage around the business areas of Pinetop. Some of the concerns, the RSRP design points are a little on the high side. The 85 decibel milliwatt RSRP for indoor service is more typical of commercial areas rather than rural areas in Pinetop. Residential indoor services for 5 megahertz carriers at 700 megahertz is more along the lines of 100 to 105 decibel milliwatts, with many models showing 102 dBm in the link budget. The covered areas have good population densities. However, the areas include very highly attended areas during the summer activities in this area. They're speaking specifically of the Wisecom Tower. One sector of the proposed site will cover the general Pinetop area, including businesses and residential areas. One sector of the proposed site covers the Pinetop Lakes and Pinetop Country Club areas. One sector of the proposed site covers the residential areas of Woodland Hills and White Mountain Country Club. The same services areas are provided by multiple sites by all the cellular providers in the area, and such as Verizon, AT&T, and Cellular One use the other 3 sites. They're functionable. A single tower location, so hopefully that speaks to your question a little bit. A single tower location may not provide sufficient capacity for the area, and additional tower locations will eventually be investigated by the applicant. Tier 1 carriers, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, point their annual capital spends to populated metropolitan areas. Rural areas are typically the last areas to be addressed, which typically increases the time required to fix service problems, congestion issues, and lead to blocked calls and slow data throughput speeds, drop calls due to the areas of impaired services and other concerns. Then they go on to show some of the maps run with the numbers that they used, and they're similar, but they vary a little bit. They show the RSSI approach and using typical design values. And then part of their analysis, they state that the specifications provided by the applicant included only spectrum owners by another entity, the SAL spectrum, Through the spectrum may have been sold, though the spectrum may have been sold or leased to T-Mobile, SAL Spectrum also owns or owned the B block, meaning the prediction should be run for 10 megahertz LTE carrier rather than 5 megahertz bandwidth. And that concludes the third-party analysis.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Does anybody have any questions for Jeremiah?
I guess more of an observation. If I'm looking at these maps right, and I don't purport to understand them, but understanding what was said, the green area is where we're getting our coverage, and this is on the low band frequencies. And I'm looking at this and just comparing in my head where my house is versus where this tower is going to go. We're talking like a 3-mile stretch of highway and a whole bunch of land where nobody lives, and a huge eyesore right off the side of the highway in the middle of town. And I don't understand the purpose. There's barely any residential area that gets good coverage from this site.
That was kind of my observation as well, Councilor Heiser. Moving the site over there gives more elevation, but then a big part of the area we have the greatest effect on is basically Forest Service and not developed land. So it's curious as to exactly why this site was selected as opposed to somewhere else.
Thank you for your observations. Anybody else?
I think there's an obvious economic benefit to a single big tower. It's less costly than multiple towers, plus it gives you the opportunity down the road to sell space like what we're talking about lower down on the same tower to other entities. So, but from the standpoint of providing service as opposed to maximizing profitability, you can provide roughly equivalent service with multiple towers. So if we deny this, we might be imposing a financial hurdle, but we're not making it impossible to serve people in a certain area. And then so I think the things that we've asked for, generally speaking, but the thing I asked for in particular, they have not been very responsive to our request for information or to the requirements from our codes. And I don't think we are imposing anything more than, lowered profitability if we say, yeah, you've got to have a small tower in the middle that meets our requirements and use the existing towers. I think that would make a feasible solution for everybody, just not the highest profitability.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And to that point, part of the point I was trying to make was it seems as though they're going to have multiple towers in the area anyways to meet the coverage need if really the end goal is to provide coverage to the community, because this does not do that.
Right, and that was one of the observations of our third-party RF analysis, RF engineer as well, that this tower alone wouldn't provide coverage for the area, so they eventually would seek more towers.
Do we have, I know the progression, the technology progression, 5G and all this has been to more smaller towers. Is that only for urban areas or something like that? I'm asking you to look down the future. I can't even imagine, but does the progression of technology indicate that these big tall towers won't be required as much in the future?
I may defer that question to an actual RF engineer, being a civil engineer, but I can tell you what I've seen from the standpoint of engineering, from civil engineering in Metropolis or greater Phoenix area. I have another civil engineer on my commission, and we had the conversation. He said what they're doing down in the valley, for instance, is putting a bunch of towers on the lights. So that's why when you go down there, you don't see one every half mile of these 180-foot towers. Number one, they don't have the same elevation obstacles or trees that we have, but they have the ability to put these on lights anywhere. And I think that at one point in our code, the intent was looking forward that was the direction that the industry was going. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears that our code was looking towards that direction. But I think that this service up here may preclude that. Number one, based on we don't have the light capacity that the cities do, and we have all the elevation deltas, but you can explain more if you'd like.
So you're referring to small cells? They're typically sites that are anywhere from 20 feet tall to 32 to 35 feet tall, depending on the height of the light pole or the street traffic signal light. So we see a lot of the small cells in areas where there's a lot of capacity. So for example, last year's Super Bowl at State Farm Stadium, I was hired to design about 50 small cells covering in and around that stadium. So why so many small cells when there was already macro coverage? That was because the amount of users within that area were very tight, condensed, packed, small areas. So you got a site that covers maybe 2 blocks. So in a area like a college or downtown Phoenix or downtown Chandler or larger metropolitan areas, you're going to see small cells, and basically they're capacity fixes. So they're allowing mobiles to not talk to the macro but switch down to the small cell even though the coverage area is smaller. So it does really good where there's slow traffic or a lot of walking, colleges. A lot of college kids love these phones. So that's where you see small cells. In order to have small cells, you have to have existing macro coverage or large site coverage to be able to do that.
Yeah, I wasn't exactly thinking of, I was more thinking in a general sense. Years ago, I was working on designing an agricultural tractor, and all the gauges were analog gauges at that time. But my program wasn't going to happen for 5 years, and we could see that 5 years down the road, digital technologies cost, the cost curve would come down. And so the time that I was putting this together was prohibitive to do what I wanted to do. But by the time we got there 5 years later, it was cheaper and better and all that. So it's sort of a general question, do we see technology changing where not necessarily a little tower every, couple of 100 yards, but something like, using towers, but just not even needing a 180-foot tower.
So there's 2 things that come into play. One is the laws of physics and how radio frequencies propagate. It's kind of like you guys, being on the council, you're sitting up above everyone else, right, than everybody sitting in the chairs behind me. So you have the ability to see everything better than what we have. We have the ability to see you because you're elevated higher than what we are in the crowd. Same concept for antennas. If you take your pair of eyes and you say, I'm going to turn them into antennas, all right, are they going to work better up here near the top of my head where God put them, or are they going to work better at my ankles? So the laws of physics come into play with radio frequency propagation.
But there's still, it's like that what used to be true in radio communications, but they just found a way to bring a ground up so that basically the signal was propagating from a higher level and covered more distance. I don't begin to understand the technology, but do you see any shift toward guys being able to solve the problem of getting cover? I mean, whoever does it will make a lot of money.
Yes.
You get of getting better coverage without having a tall tower. Don't see that?
Once again, it comes into play with laws of physics and terrain and morphologies and clutter data and trees and all those wonderful things that stop RF. It's a physics thing. Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you. This is a public hearing. We do have some individuals that would like to come speak to us. If you guys would come up, please. Warren Avery.
Thank you. I was here in October when the room was totally packed, and you voted against it, and now they're back again. And I can see the difference. It's a great marketing ploy. But I have 3 observations. Number 1, I saw a picture of this tower that looks like a tree, and it was great. But did you see any picture of the tower compared to the pine trees around it? I don't think we have any 180-foot pine trees around here, so this thing's going to stick out like a sore thumb. Next thing I saw was they have a 20-foot fall zone. Well, if you have a 180-foot tower and it falls over White Mine Boulevard, what good is a little 20 by 20 fall zone going to do? And the thing I never saw, they talk about T-Mobile expanding their marketing in this area. Did anybody see any input as to what T-Mobile currently has? In October, if I remember, somebody asked who had T-Mobile. Nobody raised their hands. So here we're supposed to put a tower in the hopes that T-Mobile is going to expand their business. So For me, I still don't think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Warren. David Adcox?
Mayor, and Commissioners, thanks for having me come over for a third time. Personally, I don't think that he's going to tell us his job here today is to get this tower approved. I agree with you, Mr. Snitzer. The technology is going. It's not going to have, I mean, why not a 500-foot tower? You know, a 180-foot tower? Let's put up a 500-foot, a 1,000-foot. We can get coverage all the way down to Phoenix. I don't think that the due diligence has been done by this company. They had 90 days. Could not respond back within the 90 days. They missed their deadline. And really, in my opinion, has not explored other options. We've got Chief Morgan, I was talking to him, and he's been talked to. There was an option of T-Mobile joining with them, and they had a deadline of today to either agree or disagree. And from what I understand, they either did not get back with them at all, or they turned it down. So it was an option that was right across the street that was given to them, and they're still turning it down. They're keep pounding this one location. And I'm representing the mobile home park, and this tower, the base of this tower, unfortunately for me, is 38 feet from the corner of my personal mobile home. And like I was...
Can you put your paper down so we can pick you up on our, thank you.
Okay.
That red microphone right in front of you.
I
Thank
got
you.
So it's 38 feet from the base of where I live. And I've showed you guys pictures. I put out different presentations with pictures, a lot of different information. And for me, I'm not going to be going out and looking out at a tower. I'm going to have to actually see this tower. I'm going to actually have to go outside and look straight up at a 180-foot tower. And the fall zone is just, it's... Jeremiah has talked about if and hope and perfect world situations. That's just BS. I'm supposed to be reading this off. I like somebody else. I get off. I'll let it go. It's down. We had over 100 signatures of people before that are against this. This was back when the mobile home park was actually open. It's normally, the majority of my people are only there for 6 months. And so the other 6 months of which we are in right now, they're not here and not representing. But we had over 100 residents that signed that. A lot of this stuff he's covered, we've covered, Jeremiah's covered, talking about the applicant doesn't provide the entire area of the proposed facility, justification as to why they don't have a preferred site, of which the site on 2666 East White Mountain Boulevard, it does not have enough space to do everything that they want. If it was the land itself with nothing else on that land, it still wouldn't be enough for the tower. They had a nice little tower picture up there with the little gazebo in there. I did not see any properties that were 38 feet from the base of that tower in that little picture you had. Say we've covered a lot of this. Talked about Chief Morgan. Just talked to him tonight. They never got back with him on a different option. Applicants said that they talked with Fish and Game. Fish and Game had no knowledge whatsoever of them contacting them at all. Doesn't qualify for a neutral site. Points that have already been made that I'm just going to touch on. They missed the deadline. The new setback is in effect now, even though they say that it wasn't in effect at the time. It was denied at the time, and they were supposed to show why it was supposed to be a good idea.
David, can you kind of wrap up a little bit, please?
Okay, it's just not enough room in the tower, and it's too close. The fall zone is just, it's not. And so I definitely request that you turn it down.
Thank you very much for your comments. Jackie Wilson?
Thank you for hearing me. I live in the mobile home park. I live there year-round, and we did have a lot of people here representing us in October when it first was said. But I do live there year-round, and I have cell coverage, but I don't have T-Mobile. But I just don't think that tower belongs in our backyard. And I'm like, David, it's setting right against the mobile homes that are on that side of the park. And a lot of our friends are elderly, and it's going to cause them health problems. And I just think that you made the right decision in October, and I hope that you find us in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate your comments. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak to us tonight, as this is a public hearing? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up for council discussion, if there is any. Councilor Kriegbaum, are you still with us?
I am here.
Okay, just want to make sure. If you have any comments, let us know.
Well, I would have much improved cell coverage at my house if a tower went in someplace up in this area. But 180 feet just seems so high and exposed right there at Hill Street. And I appreciate the people who live in all of those mobile homes. And I can certainly see their concerns.
Thank you. Councilor Heisler.
Jeremiah, could you touch briefly on the FCC rules regarding health and towers, just real quick? Because I want people to understand that we're listening to what they say, but we're also precluded from.
Right. And I mentioned that in my staff report that basically you can't take into consideration health effects if it falls within the guidelines provided by the federal government. So basically that rules out that component as part of the decision-making process.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion.
Board Member, Councilor Phillips. Board Member Phillips, I guess.
I appreciate the fact that they provided the maps and all that, and I reviewed all that stuff. And but me, I'm a visual guy. I actually took a drive out there this last week myself in my truck, and where the proposed tower would be, I understand where you're saying 38 feet is right on top of the real close to those mobile homes, and the 20-foot fall zone seems to be a little underestimated.
And I would agree with that statement, and that's why we brought forward after this came to my attention. Having worked at a municipality that had at least a 1-to-1 recommendation, that was what the commission brought forward. I initially proposed a 2-to-1 ratio. The commission went with a 1-to-1, and then ultimately the council decided that a 1 1/4 would be more significant or more substantial, be able to cover things like maintenance and safety for residents around the area. And did have this conversation with the town attorney, and he's of the opinion that this is an effective ordinance, and it was effective as of February 5th, which was 3 days after they were supposed to be here for their 90-day appeal that was granted from the board in November.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I guess I would.
Go ahead.
I'm a kind of a practical guy. And we have a reason for the height that we have in our ordinances, and this is way above that. I understand why, because the higher you get, the farther you can transmit. You know, technology is line of sight. So I understand that. But from a really practical standpoint, how can you expect a tower to fall that's 180 feet tall? If it's strong enough to stand up, it's probably strong enough to fall that way. It's 180 feet, fall radius to me.
Right.
I don't see how they could do it in 20 feet unless it's a collapsible.
So they, in a nutshell, they design a weak spot into the tower. So the top 20 feet, they do a finite element analysis, and they design it so there's essentially a weak spot there. And in a perfect world, the top would just fall off. But we don't live in a perfect world. There's potential, and even as identified in their own fall zone letter, for it to fall outside.
Exactly. That's my point. That, theoretically it might, but probably won't fall within that 20 foot.
If there was a catastrophic failure, it would fall, the entire tower would fall, and probably roll even further than 180 feet.
Yeah, and I used to live in the little, in that park, by the way, in the summertime.
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead, Councilor.
For me, the main point, just as it has been since October, is and I'd asked for them to bring this out. They brought it out, but only when I asked again. They didn't volunteer the information, and that is that they can provide essentially 100% of the same coverage by using two of the existing towers and renting space on them and building a conforming tower at this location. So I don't see a need other than a financial need, but there's no physical need. The technology is in place, and a short tower here and the other two towers would meet the needs. So, in addition to these other reasons, I would say that because there's another way to meet the need.
Thank you. Anything else? As did Board Member Phillips, I have taken a tour of that mobile home park, and I know exactly where that tower would be in relation to these folks' homes, and I just think that's way too close. I mean, we thought about this when we implemented the 1.25 fall zone, 1.25 to 1. So I think we're well aware of that. And also I want to address the 5G topic that came up on the shorter towers. I believe when we put that in our code, it was an FCC regulation that we addressed that somehow in our code. And so we were proactive in doing that, even though that technology I don't believe is up here yet. So that's why, just for the public's knowledge, that's why that is in our code. So I too do not believe this is a great place for this proposed tower.
Now, the technology, I mean, it's, we went away from microwave, as an example, we went away from microwaves. Old technology, we're going to go to a new technology. And then people figured a way to what they call multiplexing microwaves. So you have, instead of it being able to carry one communication, it can carry multiple communications. And all of a sudden, microwaves have come back into the mix, especially because there are places that suffer from low internet service through the normal means. So like the hospital has a microwave link now in case everything goes wrong. They still have a way to get in and out. So the technologies keep changing.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'm ready for a motion. Go right ahead.
I move to uphold the denial of the conditional use permit CUP 133 for the construction of vertical bridge cell tower on APN 411-43008A for the following reasons. The proposed tower's height is 180 feet. A maximum height of 75 feet is allowable in no case greater than 95 feet, and site design is neutral per 17106-050A2. The applicant must submit evidence of meeting the requirements established within 17106-070B3 regarding contact with all other tower providers, property owners within the preferred sites. The applicant failed to submit a fall zone letter that exemplifies confidence that the tower would not harm residents at the RV park in the event of catastrophic failure. The applicant failed to locate the site away from residential neighborhoods per 17106.010B. The applicant should have considered the requirements outlined in 17106.030F requiring wireless communication facilities to be sited and constructed to preserve the pre-existing character of the surrounding buildings and vegetation. While the site is neutral, it is immediately adjacent to an RV park. The request is deficient as a landscaping plan in conformance with 171.030F4F was not submitted. Tech lighting does not meet the requirements established within 17104.100 and 17106.030D. The proposed site does not meet the effective setbacks for wireless communication facilities established within 17106.0402.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. Councillor Kriegbaum?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously to uphold the denial of the CUP. There being no further business before the board tonight, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.